What Zeke took out of the second treasure chest was a tattered map, missing many pieces. He wondered if it was even a map at all. But before Zeke could think much, the system issued a notification. You have found a map containing traces of the Great Holy Sword. Seeing this name, the protagonist immediately raised his level of interest to the highest level because the name Kaiser was too famous. If it's Kaiser, don't tell me it's King Kaiser. King Kaiser and the Knights of the Clock Tower. This is the most famous book on the continent, recording Kaiser's journey and his knights from the founding of the Kronos Kingdom. A glorious civilization of the past, however, because the content is too fantastical and there is no evidence to prove its authenticity, it is only considered a fictional novel. Thinking that he had received a map related to that hero, Zeke's hands trembled with excitement. King Kaiser really existed, he whispered. Meanwhile, the system began analyzing the map and issued a notification. Proceed to restore and decipher the damaged parts of the item. Deciphering complete. The determined location has been marked on the minimap. At the same time, a mini-map automatically appeared in front of Zeke. After looking at the markers, the protagonist quickly realized where this place was, the giant mountain range. This is the territory of the barbarians. Looks like this might be easier than I thought, he said. Before Zeke could think much about the location marked on the map, the system issued another notification. Depending on the user's level, the tutorial will end. You have found an item that can be linked to the quest to complete the Hero King's vision. Find the vision of the other at the ruins that still preserve his traces. Unlimited duration quest reward. Level up sysadmin authority level. Junior admin promoted to intermediate admin. Red. Even a cow could understand this, let alone Zeke. The tutorial was just a system to help him upgrade to a certain level. Everything now is just the beginning. The real game starts now. The rewards are also at a completely different level compared to the tutorial. Okay, so it's like that. I'll sweep everything without leaving anything behind. First, try using the points I've accumulated to see how it goes, the male protagonist said with a smile. Then he made a big purchase to upgrade his skills. You have used 50 points to unlock level 2 dragon skills. You can check the information on level 2 dragon skills. Level 2 dragon skills. Dragon scale armor. Crystallized dragon scales form a tougher armor layer, increasing superior magic resistance. Unlock requires 80 points. Dragon claw. Summon powerful dragon claws to annihilate enemies with a single swing. Unlock requires 80 points. Looking at the two notifications, although Zeke was still a little tempted to unlock more skills, he had to suppress his desire. I still have a lot of points left, but I don't know when I'll have the chance to get a large number of them again. Too bad. But for now, I should just invest in a few potions and these two skills. I'll keep 400 points in reserve for now. He then unlocked the dragon scale armor and dragon claw skills immediately. Unable to contain his curiosity, Zeke immediately tested them. Starting with dragon claw, he muttered and used the skill. From his palm, a surge of energy erupted, forming a giant dragon hand. Then Zeke turned and swung it powerfully forward. With just that simple swing, it immediately caused large scratches to appear on the sturdy floor, tens of meters away from him. Seeing the damage of this skill, Zeke could only chuckle awkwardly. This skill is truly amazing. Alright, let's try the next skill then. After saying that, he activated the dragon scale armor. Illusions of golden dragon scales appeared on his left arm. To test its defensive ability, Zeke didn't hesitate to pull out his black sword from his inventory and strike his arm forcefully. However, what surprised him was that Zeke's sword was repelled by the armor. The defensive ability of the skill was so powerful that the protagonist found it hard to believe. Even without using aura, his strike should have been powerful enough to tear through anything, yet the blade bounced back. Even though it was just his bare body, it felt like he was wearing heavy full-body armor. Dragon claw for attack, dragon scale armor for defense. Simple, yet incredibly effective. My body's warmed up now. Let's continue. Zeke smiled, and began his usual training. Time flew by. Scene change. The central arena of Draker Academy. Today was the semester evaluation exam. Above the training ground, numerous scarecrow dummies were arranged, and the students stood solemnly below. A teacher's voice boomed. Today is the semester evaluation exam. Before we begin the test, I will briefly explain the rules. You all see the dummies behind me, right? They are specially made. Using only normal strength, it's difficult to leave even a scratch. but if you infuse your aura into your attack, you can easily destroy them. However, if you can't even create a single scratch, that person will be immediately disqualified, all previous evaluations will be nullified, and you will have to repeat the course from the beginning, the teacher said with an icy expression, causing the students below to gasp and exchange worried glances. Repeat from the beginning, doesn't that mean we can't level up anymore? Ignoring their chatter, the teacher shouted, silence, those whose names are called, step forward. First, Aaron. Present, Aaron replied and quickly ran to the front. At the same time, the cunning Owen, standing among the crowd, was secretly smiling. For those taking the test for the first time, being nervous is normal, but for me, this academy's training method is no different from our family's aura training system. This academy's aura training system was originally established by our Simmons family. So, even if it's a pure-blooded awakened, no one can compare to me in terms of aura control, he thought, glancing back at Zeke and Raina. Not long after, the teacher called his name. Next, Owen, if you're ready, begin. In response, Owen confidently drew his sword and assumed a sword-swinging stance, but what was special was that his body was enveloped in a blue aura. Seeing this, the students couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat and exclaim, sword resonance. Only 13 years old and already able to use sword resonance, truly extraordinary, the teacher said, glancing at his colleague behind him. The older teacher nodded in agreement. Indeed, the lineage of the family makes a difference. Then, before everyone's eyes, Owen's body shot forward like lightning, unleashing a flurry of strikes on the red dummies. With each strike, he left a large sword mark on the dummies. The other students below saw this, their faces turning pale, their mouths agape in astonishment. Then after Owen finished his test, a lecturer came up to examine the dummies. And the compliments are amazing, as expected of Simmons. At this speed, surpassing Mr. Abel is only a matter of time. He smiled brightly, but without knowing what he was saying, Owen's face turned purple. Owen lightly bit his lip, swinging his arm to push the instructor's hand aside. This annoyed them. What a rude brat, what's wrong with him? They whispered to each other, while Owen's face crumpled with anger, ignoring them. The test continued as usual, and the results weren't very good. After checking the dummies, the instructors shook their heads, saying to each other, it seems everyone is struggling, perhaps they're intimidated by Owen and their morale is low. However, no one has failed, even by a small margin, yet, all students could infuse aura into their swords. Indeed, a special class is different, but even in a place full of geniuses, the weak will be eliminated. It was now the turn of the female swordsman, Raina. She bowed to the instructors and made her request. I humbly request your assistance, instructors. I have a request. I wish to be evaluated using the Iron Dragon punishment. Her request caused the instructor's eyes to widen in surprise. Then he cautioned, that's the evaluation standard for advanced students. I know, Raina nodded with a firm gaze. Below, Owen heard Raina's request and began to sneer inwardly, becoming a pure-blood awakened and then getting arrogant to the heavens. Infusing aura into a sword and performing the Iron Dragon punishment are completely different levels. Maintaining aura on a weapon alone requires intense focus, but the Iron Dragon punishment is different. Besides controlling aura, it requires regulating aura consumption with each movement. She'll probably only manage a few swings before her aura dissipates. It seems her pride has led her to her doom. Owen, thinking of Raina's impending failure, laughed boisterously. From above, the instructor asked again, if you choose the Iron Dragon punishment, the failure criteria will be much stricter. Are you sure? I am sure, Raina nodded again. Seeing her unwavering gaze, the instructor offered no further advice. As you wish. Thank you, Raina bowed slightly. Next, before a test of such extreme difficulty, the entire testing ground fell silent. Everyone swallowed hard, focusing their eyes on Raina, not wanting to miss a single movement. In their gaze, Raina began to envelop herself in an aura and slowly raised her sword above her head. Then, with lightning speed, her wind-splitting sword strikes began. As fast as a storm, the attacks were so powerful that they didn't just leave marks on the dummies, they were directly cut to pieces. After completing her Iron Dragon technique, Raina slowly sheathed her sword, while all the dummies were destroyed beyond recognition. Seeing this, the students could only laugh. They were speechless, even their competitive spirit vanished. We thought Owen was the best at aura control, but it turns out he's incomparable. These whispers continuously reached Owen's ears, causing the fool to clench his lips, his eyes widening wildly like someone about to have a seizure, but then, his gaze was drawn. As Reina lowered her sword, below, what the hell? Damn it, is she mocking me? Owen wondered. But then his face turned blank. He quickly looked behind him, thinking in panic, no, from the beginning, she didn't even bother to pay attention to me. The place Reina's sword was pointed at was Zeke. It seemed the female swordsman was determined to compete with the main character. Back to Zeke, seeing Reina's challenge, he could only scratch his head awkwardly, sweat dripping down his forehead as if he'd just run a kilometer. He thought inwardly, this is awkward. Being stared at like this, how can I ignore it? Alright, I'll meet those expectations, otherwise, it'll be embarrassing. Zeke took a deep breath, raised his hand with determination, and loudly declared, Instructor, I also wish to be evaluated using the Iron Dragon punishment. Someone was so shocked that their face turned pale, as if they'd bitten into a spoiled fruit. An instructor nearby, with a dubious look, approached Zeke, his voice low, You are Zeke. Did you see student Reina easily perform the Iron Dragon punishment and think it's trivial? Student Reina is a pureblood awakened. Before he could finish, another instructor nearby waved his hand, interrupting him with a firm tone, Same conditions as student Reina, no problem, right? Hearing this, Zeke smiled confidently, brightly like a radiant angel. Of course, he replied. Then Zeke stepped into the central position, ready for his impressive performance, ignoring the buzzing whispers around him like a disturbed beehive. Why did you agree, instructor? His name is on the roster, but I've never seen him in class. A questioning voice rose. The instructor calmly replied, his voice even, like telling an old story, It's the result of a bet between him and Instructor Andre. Oh, you've only been here a short time, it's understandable you wouldn't know. An unprecedented golden pureblood awakened, a new student who broke Sir Abel's record in the dungeon exploration exam. That's Zeke Draker. Zeke closed his eyes, concentrating, feeling the powerful energy surging from his body. Suddenly, the system's voice rang out, cold and decisive. The Black Sword Behemoth has sensed activation of its unique ability, Aura Conversion. The Black Sword Behemoth's aura is being converted into radiant energy. Immediately, the radiant energy erupted, enveloping the sword in his hand. Seeing the glowing sword, even Zeke was surprised. He muttered, Controlling power is harder than unleashing it. Alright, this should be enough. He raised his sword high, his grip firm, his hands trembling slightly with excitement. Reina stood there, witnessing the scene before her, unable to believe her eyes. Her eyes widened like saucers, her mouth agape. That. The first technique of the Iron Dragon punishment, Heavenly Strikes beginning, compared to mine. No, it's not even inferior to Instructor Andre's. Simultaneously, Zeke's blade split the dummy in front of him with a lightning-fast strike. The sound of splintering wood echoed. It didn't stop there. Zeke was like he was dancing with his sword in his own world. Each sword strike was smooth and decisive. He fleetingly thought, I practiced the Iron Dragon punishment for 2 years before my regression. Even the sword's trajectory, foot placement, and the flow of my body's radiant energy reacted automatically, even without conscious thought. A sword technique that once bored me, but reviewing the basics wasn't bad. After the demonstration, Zeke stopped. Observing the surroundings, he thought inwardly, this should be enough to excite Reina, right? However, the audience started to buzz, whispers spreading like waves. He really enveloped the sword in radiant energy just now. Yes, I saw it too, the entire greatsword. That means Zeke has reached the Aura Night realm. The protagonist accidentally heard these words and flinched slightly, sweat trickling down his forehead. He had been deliberately hiding his strength, but it seems he revealed a little too much. Zeke thought in confusion, perhaps I was too focused, causing the radiant energy to unconsciously leak out. I only intended to adjust my power to be on par with ordinary people, but that damn smile made me stand out again. Even the teachers were startled by Zeke's performance, their eyes wide open and their mouths muttering that the only male student had reached the level of a knight. How the hell could such a seemingly absurd thing happen? This unintentionally caused someone's psychological trauma to be seriously damaged. Owen stood there so angry that he couldn't do anything. His heart trembled with every beat. shame rising like ocean waves, his confidence suddenly disappearing into thin air. But unlike Owen, Reina was extremely interested in Zeke. Her eyes shone, and she thought to herself, I didn't misjudge him after all. Scene change. A moment later, in the headmaster's office, he picked up his teacup, took a sip, and spoke in a low voice. I've heard about your performance during the semester evaluation. It was an astonishing result. Zeke was also there. He casually replied, it was just luck, sir. He chuckled, put down his teacup, and continued, reaching the night rank at age 13 and calling it luck. So, Zeke, what do you think about participating in the advanced placement exam? The protagonist was surprised, his eyes widening slightly. The advanced placement exam? You mean skip a year of school, sir? The headmaster nodded. Exactly, it could be 1 year or even more. This is a program for exceptional students like you. Zeke didn't say anything. He thought to himself, faster than expected, but it's true, I've done a lot to make myself stand out. He smiled confidently and said aloud, I'll participate. Then Zeke quickly left. Gently closing the door behind him, he mused, it seems he's planning something. With that thought, the protagonist let out a cunning smile. All right, I'm willing to play along. Inside, the headmaster sat in a daze. He reached into his pocket, searching for something, then muttering, Reina Draker and Zeke Draker, both pure-blooded Awaken, will participate in the exam. A voice clearly stated, understood, I will proceed as instructed. This is getting more and more interesting. Scene change. The high-level academies or a training room. Reina and Zeke were both there. The atmosphere was tense and suffocatingly strange, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to explode. Reina was so embarrassed that her face turned pale. She thought, at least pretend to glance at me a little. Suddenly, the door in front of them slowly opened, accompanied by a deep, authoritative voice. So, you've been waiting here, have you? The person entered and continued, introducing. This individual will oversee today's advanced placement exam, a high-ranking knight of the family, Sir Al Draker, a handsome and charming young man with an irresistibly cold beauty. As soon as Zeke saw Al, he couldn't believe his eyes. His heart involuntarily pounded. That's Mokuria Kensei. At that moment, images from the past flooded back. A gloomy day, mirroring the heavy hearts, a seemingly deceased person, their steps heavy with sorrow. Zeke was there too at the time. Seeing the scene before him, he exclaimed in surprise, Draker. That damned imperial dog, why is he here? But when Zeke looked closer at the face of the deceased, he was quite surprised. Al said nothing, only bent down and silently dug layer by layer of earth, as if realizing something. Zeke also stood there in silence. Surrounding them were countless cold tombstones. Suddenly, Zeke picked up a shovel, startling Al. Need a hand? He asked. Without waiting for Al's reply, Zeke dug with the shovel, continuing, even if you refuse, I'll still help. While working, Zeke introduced himself. I'm Zeke Morita, from the Northern Alliance. You're Al Draker, right? Al responded blankly, no, I've abandoned the name Draker. Zeke felt more empathy and chuckled softly. Oh, so it's the same for you, huh? What should I call you then? He stammered. Just call me Mokuria Kensei. Back to the present, hearing this somewhat unfamiliar name, the protagonist was astonished. He thought to himself, a name perfectly suited to his cold demeanor, Mokuria Kensei, whatever. A first-year student's advanced placement exam being overseen by a high-ranking knight, then both quickly bowed respectfully, saying in unison, Greetings, Sir High-ranking Knight. The esteemed position of Pillar truly supports the Draker clan, a title only achievable by those possessing exceptional strength, prestige, and experience. The instructor spoke decisively. The format is a sword fight, familiar to anyone from our academy. As long as you haven't fainted or given up, you can continue challenging. Use all your strength. Hearing this, Reina confidently stepped forward. Then I'll start first. But Al proudly responded, no need to separate, let's charge together. Reina's blood boiled at the challenge. Her eyes flashed with determination as she prepared to charge in like a provoked wild animal, but at that moment, Zeke quickly reached out to stop her, his movement as swift as catching a fly. Don't be so hasty, he shouted, his voice both urgent and teasing. You know the skill gap, right? Besides, the test already started. If you hadn't controlled your emotions and charged in just now, we would have lost points miserably. Hearing this, Reina glanced sideways, her sharp gaze directed at the examiner. He was diligently writing something on a board, his quill pen dancing like he was drawing a magic spell. She sighed deeply, her breath exhaling like white smoke in the cold air. Though she didn't want to, she finally lowered her voice and reluctantly asked, "What should I do?" Zeke Draker, the protagonist, turned and gave a confident half-smile. He thought to himself, "That's right, you're known as a genius with lightning-fast reactions and judgment." Then, nodding, he replied confidently, "I have a perfect plan for this situation, let's give him a truly fatal blow." After they finalized their plan, the match officially began. Looking at the examiner's sword, Zeke narrowed his eyes, analyzing in his mind, a strange sword with only one blade, a characteristic design of the Eastern Empire, a Huan Dao. "He's always used it," he muttered. Reina, standing beside him, looked tense, seemingly viewing this as a matter of honor, but Zeke merely smirked, thinking to himself, "What's honor and pride to the weak? Let's forget personal matters and focus on the plan." A second later, both simultaneously swung their swords and charged forward like two arrows. The clash of metal resounded, two swords swung, creating two sharp diagonal cuts from different directions, tearing through the air with a whistling sound, but the knight simply leaned, his movements graceful, as if dancing in the wind. His blade slid through the gap between the two attacks and then counterattacked as fast as lightning. In just a split second, he swung his sword down. Reina immediately stepped back, just in time to avoid the slash that grazed a few strands of hair falling in front of her. Zeke was still excited, eyes shining, and rushed forward without hesitation. Both continued their relentless attacks, swinging their swords like a downpour, but the knight remained unfazed. The clang of swords echoed throughout the space, deafeningly loud, drowning out even the wind. Immediately afterward, with a powerful blow, the knight forced both Reina and Zeke to recoil. Reina glanced at Zeke, silently thinking, this is the strength of a high-ranking knight. Even though she followed Zeke's instructions, continuously targeting his blind spots, she couldn't even land a single blow, not even a scratch. Then, gritting her teeth, Reina unleashed the first technique of the third chapter of the Dragon Slayer arts. She told herself, with unwavering determination, I must fight with the intent to kill. She swung her sword with force at him, the blade whistled through the air like a dragon's roar. It seemed the blow would inflict damage, but at the critical moment, the knight gently leaned away, his movement as fluid as water. Following the momentum, Reina lunged forward, losing her balance. Before she could stop, the knight swung his arm with great force, sending Reina flying like a broken kite. Her body spun through the air before crashing heavily into a stone wall. The impact was tremendous, shattering the wall into pieces. Dust filled the air. Nearby support staff rushed over, anxiously asking, Reina Draker, are you all right? Reina coughed, her mouth groaning in pain. Blood trickled from her lips. Her legs trembled as she tried to stand, but her hands were numb, devoid of feeling. She stammered, I'm fine, it's dangerous, get back. In her heart, she thought, in a blink of an eye, my consciousness was overwhelmed, creating an opening. Compared to my strength, I have absolutely no chance, but can you really do it? She recalled the moment before the fight began. Zeke Draker. Zeke had presented his strategy, but Reina vehemently opposed it. I can't agree to such a despicable tactic. Do you intend to stay in a duel of honor, Draker? But Zeke calmly retorted, is honor edible? He continued, this isn't a knightly duel, it's a test. It assesses the ability to kill your opponent. After some thought, Reina helplessly nodded, all right, after all, I did ask for your opinion first. But do you really think this tactic will work? The opponent is a high-ranking knight. While Reina was still doubtful, Zeke was absolutely confident. Just create a situation where it can work. He added, why didn't you dodge that attack when we fought in the cradle? Reina was flustered, because I didn't expect you to use such tactics. Zeke replied nonchalantly, a high-ranking knight would do the same. Just wait for my signal, it will definitely work. A small opening is all we need. Back to the present. The fight continued. Zeke stood there, using a technique that applied the Dragon Slayer arts, his body suddenly split into multiple images, appearing in various positions, surrounding the knight. Just looking was enough to make one dizzy, unable to distinguish the real from the fake. A never-before-used ultimate technique, finally unleashed today, the invisible wind formless body. But the knight wasn't a novice, deeply knowledgeable. He quickly recognized it, exclaiming, "This is the Duke's technique." He glanced around, observing carefully. Suddenly, Zeke swung his sword and lunged, but the knight parried it instantly. Zeke laughed confidently, "From now on, you'd better prepare yourself." At that moment, the bright lights suddenly went out. The atmosphere plunged into pitch darkness. The knight was surprised. The lights are off. So that's it, using the magical interference properties of a pure-blood awakened being, he thought, and then swung his sword, sending Zeke flying, and then he displayed a magnificent display of swordsmanship in the darkness. Wherever Zeke struck, he effortlessly parried, as if savoring candy. Truly, a high-ranking knight is different. His strength is not to be underestimated, he thought, sneering inwardly. Such a childish thought. He thought that simply obscuring vision would create an opening for a high-ranking knight. But what is this unsettling feeling, in this thick darkness? Even he could only vaguely make out the shapes around him, yet Zeke moved as if he could see everything. It's a good opportunity to try a new dragon technique. This seems like the most suitable opportunity. After all, he isn't the type to boast everywhere, he thought to himself. On the other side, Zeke immediately activated the dragon technique, Dragon Claw. As swift as a gust of wind, the protagonist playfully teased the knight, causing him to struggle to defend. The knight was astonished. Is this the swordsmanship of a top student? To call it swordsmanship isn't quite right, it's too different. In any case, Zeke Draker has far surpassed the level of a mere student. Reina Draker seemed to be able to move in the darkness just like Zeke. Could it be that it has eliminated unnecessary energy sources and placed a limit on me? That tactic only works against opponents of comparable strength. The knight, thinking this, chased after Zeke, launching relentless attacks in the darkness. Now, only the flashes of light from clashing blades remained. The two swords met at a speed too fast for the naked eye to follow. Before the sound reached their ears, the metallic light flashed in the air, sharp and cold. Sparks flew like fireworks in the night, quickly fading and leaving behind the acrid smell of burning metal. Observing the knight's reaction, Zeke smiled, thinking, his movements are almost the same as before the lights went out. He adapted to the darkness that quickly. On the other side, the knight suddenly felt something unusual. Instinctively, he swung a powerful blow forward. But the strike missed. The knight frowned. That unsettling feeling is gone. I can only vaguely see shapes. It feels like I'm fighting a shadow. He continued to blindly swing into the void, but every attack missed. Zeke seemed to have vanished from his sight. At that moment, a light bulb fell from above, right in front of the knight, but that wasn't all. Zeke continued to sever other light bulbs. They tumbled down like a downpour, all part of his plan. The noise completely masked Zeke Draker's presence, and the knight lost all trace of him. He immediately looked confused. Zeke appeared in front of him with a bright smile, but the trick was that at this moment he shouted loudly with an echoing voice. While the knight still didn't understand what was happening, a light bulb plunged from above towards his position. Zeke recalled Professor Pannon's words, "The structure and materials are quite simple, but if left as is, it can only be used once. What kind of magic do you intend to put in it? Explosive magic, perhaps?" Zeke didn't explain much, simply smiling calmly. "No, just a flash of magic and a loud bang is enough." As expected, a huge explosion erupted with a deafening roar. This was the perfect moment. Our male protagonist calmly stood, plugging his ears, waiting for the miracle to happen. The knight was startled by the explosion. The harsh sound tore through the air, making everything around him seem to distort. His body instinctively recoiled. He sank to the ground, his heart feeling constricted in his chest. Only now did he realize he had been tricked. He thought to himself, "It seems I was wrong to think it was a surplus energy source." But this was their chance. Reina and he charged forward together. But a high-ranking knight was still a high-ranking knight. At the most critical moment, he unleashed the slaying dragon technique. Chapter 4, First Strike, Full Moon. The attack was launched with blinding speed, leaving Zeke and Reyna no time to react. Their bodies were instantly hit and sent reeling backward. Then a terrible explosion occurred, sending dust and smoke billowing everywhere. However, forcing him to use this attack was a huge success in itself. In the end, Zeke and Reyna were unable to win, instead being beaten to the ground, their faces bruised and battered as if run over by a carriage. Immediately, the medical team rushed to the scene, carrying Zeke and Reyna away for treatment. The hurried clatter of footsteps sounded like an urgent rescue melody. The knight stood there, unscathed, looking as nonchalant as if he'd just returned from a stroll in the park. A professor approached Owl, bowing respectfully. "You've worked hard, sir," he said. Suddenly, a furious roar like thunder echoed from the distance. "That damned Owl, you've left my disciple in such a state." Owl turned to look in the direction of the sound, his eyes narrowing slightly as he recognized Duke. He bowed politely. "Greetings, Gale Knight," he said in a low voice. Duke approached, putting an arm around Owl's shoulders in a relaxed manner. His face was teasing as always, a wide grin on his face, still stiff as ever. How's my disciple?" he said, clapping Owl on the shoulder with excitement, causing Owl to lean slightly. He fell silent, a hint of reflection in his eyes as he recalled what had just happened. At the moment Zeke Draker's sword touched Owl, he intentionally dropped his sword, maintaining a defensive stance. Why didn't he counterattack when he had the chance? Because the goal wasn't victory, but advancement, only revealing the necessary strength, Owl said thoughtfully. In an even tone, he said, "Zeke Draker has far exceeded my assessment." A while later, in the meeting room, a student advancement review meeting was held at the academy. After hearing everyone's opinions, he sat up straight and concluded. "So it seems everyone agrees with this resolution, then." A resounding yes echoed from the room. "Sir Headmaster, there are no objections," and as a result, Zeke and Reyna were promoted to levels 5 and 3, respectively. After that, Zeke tried to live as quietly as possible, like a lazy cat wanting only to curl up in a corner. After inheriting all of Duke Andre's techniques and style, he took over Zeke's position. He maintained a good relationship with Professor Pannon, but gradually drifted apart when Zeke was selected for the Royal Magic Research Institute, putting on gloves and leaving the academy. From then on, Zeke avoided entanglement with the offspring of powerful families, staying away from trouble like the plague. Interestingly, however, AO still came to find Zeke every quarter to request sparring matches. Like a hunting dog refusing to let go of its prey, it seemed he had achieved some kind of enlightenment. His eyes shining as if he had found the truth, AO immediately took leave, joining a martial arts dojo to train, leaving behind his glorious title as a high-ranking knight. Time passed. 2 years later, Zeke graduated from the academy. Inside the dormitory, the joyful voice of old butler Decker echoed with excitement. "Congratulations, young master, you're the youngest student to be admitted to Valhalla. The family head will surely be very proud." At this point, Zeke was no longer the naive 13-year-old boy, but a taller, more handsome 15-year-old version of Zeke Draker, full of style. The headmaster personally wrote a letter of recommendation for admission. This was not common at all, it was a precious privilege. He clicked his tongue. "Really, but this youngest student title, so my 2 years of peaceful life were meaningless, huh?" He then spoke calmly. "There are about 3 months left until the admission ceremony, right?" Decker, standing beside him, nodded. Zeke continued, "Decker, go to Atlas first." Decker was quite startled, his eyes widening as if he'd just heard the sky was falling. But he had no choice but to agree. "Yes, sir, but what about the young master?" Before Decker could finish, Zeke interrupted decisively. "I will be resting alone in peace and quiet. I don't want to be disturbed by anyone, do you understand?" Decker, hearing this, dared not disobey and bowed his head. "Yes, young master." Then Zeke looked at the map in front of him, his mind swirling with his own thoughts. The location of that relic was in the Giants' Mountains. Under the pretext of rest, he would use the Agros Kingdom Adventurers Guild to carry out the expedition. There was no reason to reveal his destination to suspicious people. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door from outside. Zeke quickly said, "Come in." Liam entered, bowing deeply and respectfully. "My lord Zeke Draker, I humbly greet you." Zeke turned to Liam, frowning slightly. "Didn't I tell you this greeting was too formal?" a simple greeting is enough. Decker, understanding, quickly said, "Then I'll take my leave, young master." Zeke nodded. As for the Valhalla enrollment, just take care of it with the black card." After Decker left, Liam curiously asked, "What's going on, my lord? Why have you summoned me all the way to the Platinum Mansion?" Zeke calmly replied, "I heard you're being transferred to a special class this time, right? As your master, how could I just stand idly by? I've compiled everything you'll need during your time at the academy: predicted exam questions, midterm evaluation materials, training curricula, and all the necessary supplies for the exam." He handed Liam a stack of papers while Liam stood there dumbfounded. Zeke continued, "Go to Fafnir's Breath and show them this list. They'll give you all the supplies, and when you get there, you'll probably need a suitable sword. Go to Fafnir's Breath and have one custom made. I've already paid in full, so don't worry. I believe you won't let me down, Liam." Liam was so moved by this that he couldn't hold back his tears. His eyes welled up, and tears threatened to spill. He immediately bowed, his voice choked with emotion. "Your lordship's expectations, I will absolutely not betray." Zeke sighed and muttered, "I just told you not to overdo it a minute ago." Liam forced a smile. "I will correct myself immediately, my lord." The kingdom of Agros is located in the northernmost region of the continent, sharing with Delpoethebia and Elencia, is called one of the 4 central kingdoms. The giant mountain marks the boundary between the land of beasts and the continent, containing countless large and small dungeons, attracting dozens of adventurers eager to change their lives flocking here. The founding king of Agros is now just a faint name in history. He linked adventurers with the dungeons, transforming it into the kingdom's main industry. With royal support, they divided the giant's mountains into hundreds of zones, establishing transport routes and transfer points. This is the precursor to the Agros Adventurers Guild, an organization now widespread across the continent. At the registration counter, the announcement rings out steadily: "Next, number 546, number 546, number 546, absent, next, number 547. Congratulations, you have become an adventurer, Zeke Mare. Please submit these documents to the licensing authority to receive your registration card." Zeke, after disguising himself with a wig and magical glasses, transformed into a completely different person. He smiled, softly saying, "Thank you." Then he left. A version of Zeke with a wig and magical glasses looked so strange that he almost didn't recognize himself in the mirror. He, try and recognize me now." Looking at the papers in his hand, Zeke was very pleased. He thought to himself, "If I want to operate freely, it's best to have the identity of an adventurer. I can't keep going back and forth so openly under the name Draker." Very quickly, the carriages carrying the explorers set off one after another. Zeke also sat on the carriage to begin the journey. Sitting in the car, he thought it would be lucky to find a seat together during peak season like this, but suddenly someone's voice rang out in a friendly tone. "Hey friend, are you also an adventurer?" Zeke heard that and slowly opened his eyes. Sitting across from him, he laughed and said that he looked so tense. This must be his first time in a dungeon, right? Another person approached, excitedly saying, "Hey friend, want to join our team? We may look like this, but we're all veterans. We're heading near there. Dungeons are very dangerous. Going alone is easy to become a tasty meal for monsters." Zeke said nothing, only thinking to himself, "No matter where I go, these kinds of trash always appear. They haven't given up, still trying to lure people. They say that the first team you go with into a dungeon will decide half your fate in the adventurer's world. Have you heard of that, friend?" Zeke sighed dejectedly, muttering, "It's the standard script of those who lure new recruits into dungeons, using them as bait for monsters or selling them to slave traders. What the hell?" He thought that, but Zeke remained silent, neither accepting nor refusing. Meanwhile, their eyes were all fixed on him like a pack of hungry wolves staring at a juicy prey. Impatiently, Zeke stood up, abruptly saying, "Shut your mouths." The statement stunned them. One stammered, What's wrong, friend? Did I say something wrong?" But the protagonist said nothing more, just walked straight ahead. He leaned over a small opening and said to the driver, 500 meters behind and to the left, there are monsters. I think they're orcs, so this area is a monster zone." The driver was surprised. What did you say? This is a safe route." Immediately the sounds of laughter rang out around you. maybe because you're a newbie, you're so nervous, brother. Don't you know that the route directly managed by the Kingdom's Adventurer Association headquarters is not accessible to even wild animals? Monster, but Zeke's next words sent chills down his spine. What is that thing right behind you? He widened his eyes as if he couldn't believe his ears. In fact, behind him was an orc with bloodshot eyes and sharp teeth, his mouth open and screaming, standing tall. It looked like he was very hungry for the smell of fresh meat. The carriage was immediately attacked by them, as expected. No one in life would have thought that anything could happen. There was not just one ferocious monster but a whole group of monsters, each one of them swinging at each other. The scene immediately fell into chaos. They were tall and muscular, their skin was rough like stone scales, their red eyes reflected the crazy bloodlust. They raised their heavy axe high. Rusty hammers brought down on the carriage, tearing it apart, piece by piece. The horses whinnied in panic and backed away, but it was too late. They only had time to neigh a few times and then fall to the ground with blood splattered with crimson. At this moment, only the sound of splintering wood and the sound of weapons colliding throughout the forest was left. The arrow had just used its snout to entice Zeke to join his team. I still don't understand what's going on, poking my head out of the carriage. But he couldn't believe that an orc noticed him and was walking closer as soon as he realized what was happening. That huge black shadow was right in front of him, and now it dried up without a drop of blood remaining in the last moments of his life. He only hoped that it would give him a chance to live and save his life, but life was so rosy that with one shot, his head splattered around with blood splashing all over the ground. The ending was too bitter for a young man with bad luck. Zeke thought to himself and quickly jumped out to hide behind a large tree nearby to observe the orcs. Enjoying the spoils that had just been harvested, each of them grabbed and chewed, munching and chewing, gnawing and gnashing sounds, causing horror to see that scene. Zeke thought that the fact that the orcs could roam freely in the safe area meant that the base was no longer functioning properly. I don't know how much time has passed. The monsters ate their fill and quickly left, leaving behind a dirty battlefield. Zeke walked out to the scene. The surrounding corpses were piled up like street food. Perhaps Zeke was the only survivor. He stood there and thought to himself, as expected, it was an unimaginable mess. Even Agroza's soldiers were defeated, but with this force, ordinary monsters should not have been their opponents, right? But as soon as we looked closer, Zeke's eyes immediately frowned in annoyance. Their bodies were covered in long cuts that weren't something only monsters could inflict. His mind immediately conjured the bloody scene that had just taken place. Zeke thought, not monsters, this was done by humans. Looking at this, Zeke's face suddenly turned dark. He thought to himself that the corpse was heavily destroyed, obviously to create the scene as if it was attacked by a monster, but if it was really a monster that attacked, the sand marks would not be as neat as this. Moreover, most of the victims died instantly without any signs of resistance, definitely caused by a group of knights. But then he frowned and muttered that if he lingered here, he would only make things more complicated. Now the top priority is to find the relics. Thinking so, he continued his journey with determined steps. After walking a bit where there were skulls and crossbones piled up like a small mountain, Zeke stopped to look around and thought to himself, this is a sign marking the territory of the barbarians, but according to the miniature map, I have almost reached the Kaiser ruins. But he stopped, feeling a cold feeling down his spine as if he was being watched from behind. Zeke was puzzled and gritted his teeth, thinking how could the Empire's hunting dogs be here? The Emperor's hunting dogs only select the most elite talents from among the Empire's apprentice knights, specializing in tracking and assassination skills. At this time, the hunting dog team is still a mystery, even within the Empire. Not many people know of their existence, but soon when the Empire sparks a great continental war, they will quickly rise to become a key force. I closely observed their movements through the mini-map on the way here. I can't forget this unique chasing technique. Zeke muttered with cold eyes because before the regression, these guys killed him. Furthermore, Duke once said that the Emperor obsessed with immortality was searching the entire continent for something. That's right, even before I was reincarnated, the Emperor was obsessed with antiques. His ambition to unify the continent was crazy enough, but he still greedily pursued the illusory dream of immortality. He smirked and wondered if that was the case. Perhaps the Empire had also found that relic here. The only thing left to do is confirm it yourself. Then Zeke immediately disappeared in just one note as fast as the blink of an eye. causing the hunting dogs close behind to look sideways and look at each other in surprise. A guy with an unusually long scar on his face quickly touched his chest pocket. Searching for something, he pulled out a gun, but before he could pull the trigger, Zeke launched a surprise attack, so swift that the man couldn't react. The gun in his hand fired a meaningless shot, and then a hand said goodbye to its owner. A clean, swift strike from Zeke made the man's eyes widen. Zeke spoke coldly, "Yellow Flare, unexpected situation, you are indeed the captain." "Only 3 men, this is an outer patrol, normally, a patrol has 12 men, Zeke commented. Another man approached from a distance, shouting, "Who are you? Who sent you to do this?" Zeke didn't bother to answer. He instantly decapitated the captain. "Finishing," he said, "still don't understand the situation. The question here is, think carefully. You still have 2 mouths, if one falls silent forever, the other won't be speaking for long either. Make a wise choice." The result, Zeke efficiently dealt with them all. From that day on, they never saw the sun again. After the satisfying slaughter, Zeke opened a map, observing it and muttering, "This is their temporary base, so many of them, impressive, Duke." They turned the base into a place filled with mangled corpses. They dared to attack the kingdom's soldiers. Could it be that they really found the relic? He smirked, "Let's go see. Anyone who dares to raise their sword against me won't have peace." Inside their usually peaceful base, a guard yawned widely, his eyes stinging as if he'd been crying. But then he looked down and sighed, exclaiming, "No way, what madman would dare invade the territory of the barbarians and leave guards like this?" The man beside him nodded in agreement, "It's really strange." Before they could understand what was happening, one of them was suddenly attacked. The other met the same fate. In less than a minute, both guards were gone, unable to yawn again. Someone moved quickly through the inside, like a gust of wind. A man in black noticed something was amiss. Another man, seeing him freeze, snapped, "What are you standing there for? Go inside." He replied, "Wait, didn't I hear some noise from the gate just now?" The other glanced towards the gate and said, "I didn't hear anything." He didn't know that his comrade had been suddenly attacked, blood spraying everywhere. The noise caught his attention, but he only managed to glance before witnessing his comrade's head being cut off by a stranger. Shocked, he yelled, "Intruder!" Before he could say more, Zeke, fast as lightning, punched him in the face, silencing him. Without hesitation, Zeke sent him to meet his ancestors. In a moment, blood stained his blade. He thought, "Seeing them reminds me of that time when I received orders from Mr. Chung, exhausted from the 5-year factional war, to attack Pavila cattle." The feeling was exactly the same. Zeke was now surrounded, standing on higher ground. A leader spoke, "Southern assassin techniques. McCain or Pavila, no matter which faction, once you've infiltrated this far, you can't leave alive. If you surrender now, we'll kill you gently." Following the sound, the protagonist looked up, thinking, "He's the captain in command here. He's barely reached the threshold of a blue knight. Compared to the hounds I've fought in my past life, you guys are still green." He retorted without fear, "Ridiculous. Kill you gently. Is that what someone who just murdered their comrade says? You should tear me apart and exterminate my 3 generations to avenge your fallen comrades." The central continent, only cowards and weaklings. They're furious at Zeke's taunts. The captain roared, "Damn it, grant him his wish. Tear him apart while he's still alive." Immediately, they attacked, each swinging their swords, aiming at Zeke, hacking away like chopping wood. But the protagonist thought, "Something's wrong. Are these hounds really only this skilled? Are they too weak, or have I become too strong? There's no need to observe further." He immediately activated his magical reflection skill. The surrounding light was extinguished. The cave plunged into darkness. The captain, high above, looked bewildered, thinking, "Power outage, right now. Could it be the magical interference of a dragon slayer? Wait, from the beginning he only fought hand to hand, didn't use aura, and his swordsmanship was Southern blade style, definitely an assassin. Could it simply be a technical error?" After a moment's thought, he spoke to reassure his comrades, "Don't panic, it'll be restored soon. Focus on defense until then." But then, surprise, when the lights came back on, a horrifying scene unfolded. In a few moments, All the hounds below had been dealt with by Zeke. Corpses lay scattered on the cold ground, blood staining the earth crimson. He couldn't believe his eyes, sweat poured down his face like rain. Shocked, he muttered, "What the hell?" Zeke had silently approached him from behind. The Emperor is bold, daring to target the relic of hero King Kaiser. His whole body trembled. He mumbled, "Kaiser's relic? What the hell are you talking about?" But as he turned around, Zeke had vanished. Only his voice echoed, like a ghost, "Don't worry, even if you don't confess, I'll find out." In the darkness, a hand filled with killing intent, Zeke quickly pressed his sharp blade to the man's neck. The man realized his death was near. Panicked, he stammered, "Wait, we really don't know anything." Zeke smirked, "Oh, you don't know, huh?" Blood spurted. The unfortunate captain's end couldn't be avoided. After finishing, Zeke silently walked towards the cave exit, where bright light shone. He left a sword behind, and thought, everything that happened here will be framed as the work of the McCain Cattles. That's the criminal organization from the southern continent that I belonged to in my past life. A gang willing to do anything for money. After the southern mainland's kingdom of Cusco collapsed due to civil war, the ruined land became a lawless zone cut off between Kane and Pavila cattle. I could have just used dragon technique to hide my identity, but I deliberately used the Southern Blade Group sword technique and even left Kane's signature warning, because presenting a clear target is a safer option. You smirked. The Empire will surely think this is the work of the Southern Gang. Even if they act on this, it'll only help me eliminate McCain. This benefits me even more, based on the letter found inside the Emperor's. The Empire is far crazier than you. The Emperor's orders. Basically, it's just searching for ancient relics, but the shocking part is the accompanying campaign map. Not only in the central continent, but also in the eastern continent, which is still in a ceasefire, even the mysterious Black Sea region. He sent his hounds to any place suspected of containing ancient relics. That means their forces have reached a scale comparable to my past life, but it seems they haven't found the Kaiser's relic yet. I'd better act quickly. Suddenly, a red flare shot up from the hound's lair. I've already moved away from there, he smiled. Red flare. Could that be the starting signal for the Heaven and Earth net?